Okay, so this is take two because Naked Man ruined everything in take one. So welcome to the book club. This is the book club for people who don't read fast. I am here by myself. Angela is also here, although she's hiding behind her avatar and refuses to speak. So it'll just be me. Now, if you're tuning in and you wonder what this is my attempt at doing something that clearly is not working, which is starting a book club online for people who want to talk about books but don't want to burn through a book every other week or so. My theory was that I would be able to maybe entice some people to read the books that I'm currently reading, and then we could discuss it. And I honestly think that that might work. However, I'm also equally sure that a lot of people will find this extremely scary because things might happen and therefore are reluctant to join in. Let's put it that way. So what's going to happen is I will talk about the book. If you're watching, you can tune in. There's a question app on the side of this thing, and you can say, hey, I want to be part of this too. And then I can give you a message, and you can actually get into the talk as well, so that it's not open and we don't get Naked Man join in again, because that doesn't really work. I'm going to post up the link to the event page on Twitter again, so that anyone who wants to can jump in. Let's see here. So on the Twitter, I am going to put up here, we talk about books and robots. And then tweet. Then maybe I can get someone else in on this too. For example, here. This is very exciting for all of you who watch this right now, that I'm trying to get someone in on this that actually wants to get in on this and will not do stupid things. So I'll copy that. And then okay, so the book in question that I want to talk about is Philip K. Dick's classic, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Now, you may know this book as a movie that was created in the 80s called Blade Runner. And it's important to understand that the book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and Blade Runner are quite different stories. If you watch the movie and then read the book, you're really getting two entirely different experiences, to the point where even the characters have different names. Some of them have the same first or last name, but there's been changes even in their names. And the overall dynamic between the characters is the same, but there are other characters involved in the book than there are in the movie. And the general scope of the story is also quite different. Now, the reason why I find the book so interesting is because it explores parts of the story, explores parts of how human behavior happens that's different. Hello. You actually managed to get in.
I finally.
So just so you know, this is actually being recorded and is live, so other people can see you.
Great.
So you have to be okay with that. Now, I can also promise you that the crazy dude will not be able to get in again. So, since you're joining in, why don't you explain who you are?
I'm just Claudia.
You're just Claudia.
I'm just Claudia Snell. What do you mean, explain me?
Oh, sorry. Introduce yourself. That's
yeah. I'm just
on my part.
Worcester, Massachusetts. That's it. And that's it.
So you're joining because, of course, you have read at least parts of this book as per the rules of our book club.
Yes, I read so slowly. I'm about halfway through.
Halfway through. That's good. So then you've got pretty much the gist of it.
Yeah.
So I've never been part of a book club before, so I don't know anything about book clubs. So I'll just ask you, what do you think so far? What stands out to you?
It's sad. It just seems like a sad world. This poor guy. He just doesn't seem like a very happy.
Elaborate. Like, you have to assume people have never, assume people come into this going, I wonder if I should read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep or just watch Blade Runner.
No, they're not the same at all. That was the first thing I noticed. I'm like, no, he's nowhere near as cool. And he seems just much more sad. than Blade Runner. And the world is sadder, I think, because there's like I'm like, wait, where's like all the cool stuff? But
yeah, the thing that really struck me was because I read this a long, long time ago when I was in high school, I think. And what really struck me now when I reread it was just how when I remember thinking way back when they can't make this into a movie. Like I read the book and I go, I understand why they did something else because this isn't something you can make into a movie.
no.
But when I read it now again, I'm like, wow, that would be the most horrifyingly depressing thing to watch ever.
Yeah.
Because it really is a society that has collapsed and is over. And there are all these people that are basically just trapped. And then they have to deal with that, right?
Yeah. Like he can't even leave. So it's like, it's really bad. I was like, no, no. The thing in Blade Runner, you kind of like, oh, that would be cool to kind of live there a little.
Yeah, and but there's still this dynamic in the book. But the whole book is about this idea of the difference between an android and a human. And they really play up this part about there's no clear way of differentiating between androids and humans. It's very difficult. I don't know if you've gotten to the part where he starts trying to kill androids.
He's
probably
not tried to kill anybody yet. He's just trying to figure out if his test is working.
Yeah, because you'll notice in like a chapter or two that he actually gets in a discussion with someone about whether or not he, after having killed an android, how he knows that he actually killed an android, which is a whole like. Imagine being in a situation where you actually don't know. Like you're like, I know you're the one I'm supposed to go after, but
not sure.
You, am I just being sent on a wild goose chase here because people are evil, or what's going on?
Yeah, and that's different than the movie too, because it's very clear who he's supposed to kill. Because those androids they're very obvious.
Yeah. So I guess. You know, have you read anything else that he has written, Philip K. Dick?
Nope.
Because I spent a long time trying to read several of his books, and all I got out of it was he must have been a very depressed person. It's everything is super oppressive, but there's always some sort of message within his stories, and I'm wondering what he's trying to say here, because there's a lot of levels to this, right? You have this idea of making humans that aren't human, and then you have this idea of these different levels of people. Like you have like Deckard, this guy who's a bounty hunter. He's ostensibly a regular person, but then you also have this other character, J.R. Isidore, who is the same as J.R. Sebastian in the movie.
Yeah.
Who is a bit mentally challenged.
A bit impaired.
Yeah, and who lives by himself and and because he is challenged, he's not allowed to leave. Because that's the whole underlying thing, right? That everyone who has left the Earth behind and gone to Mars. And then when they go to Mars, they get a free android.
Yeah.
And then if you can't reproduce, or you have any kind of deficiency of any kind, or you're too old, then you're not allowed to leave Earth. And then you have these people that are basically trapped in this radioactive hell.
Right.
And that's kind of the whole setting of it, which is very, very bleak stuff. But it's interesting that like this was written a long, long time ago, and he really touches on this idea of value of people and how they're valued depending on what they do, and you can still kind of see that today. So he's really, I feel like he's picking at all these scabs of humanity and being like, is it irritating when I do this?
Yeah.
Let's do that some more.
Like, that's true. Yeah. I thought the machine, the mood machine thing was interesting.
The mood organ?
Yes, because they're so obsessed with everybody being happy all the time, and I kind of liked the wife's thing where like, no, I'm dialing in depression for a couple of hours.
Yeah, and he's like, why would you want to be depressed? What is wrong with you?
Exactly. I have that discussion with a lot of people a lot of times, because they're like, lighten up and be happy. And it's like, it's not appropriate right now.
It's interesting though, because
Fine.
you've seen all these things that people talk about, how social media gives this false veneer of everyone's always happy, right? And I think that in today's society, we're basically just seeing the best version of everyone's lives all the time. Everyone's posting all their pictures and talking about all the things they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's kind of in a way similar to what he's talking about with these mood organs, that rather than having real emotions, you literally go and dial in an emotion and touch it and then and you have this experience.
Yep. And who hasn't done it?
Yeah. And it's just like, the funny passage where he's like arguing with his wife over what to dial, and she goes, and he goes, I want you to dial, what is it, 3? So and that's the compulsion to dial happiness. So you would dial in a mood that makes you dial in another mood.
Yes.
It's just the most meta thing ever. But
it was really weird. Yeah, it was really weird. And I've actually had that discussion with partners of mine where they're like, well, your depressive mood is really upsetting to me, so you should be happy. And it's like as if you can order someone to just do that, and it's like,
we have drugs now, right, that are supposedly supposed to do that, which is not instant. You can't take a pill and just.
Yeah, no.
But the idea, this prevalent idea that you can somehow, there's a wrong mood, and that you can somehow alter it into the correct one through some sort of external means.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
But it's interesting how he's talking about it, and it's so long ago, right? And he's really focused on this idea of you can actually change your mood on purpose, and everyone should be doing this, because in a way he's really talking about basically drugs for all sorts of things. It's just that it's a machine instead.
Yeah.
The other major component of the story, of course, is the electric sheep, which is entirely absent from the movie.
Do you have pets?
I used to have pets. I don't anymore.
Because I'm like, well, I got a cat, and I'm thinking, well, he's pretty awesome, but if, there are some things that a live animal does.
Well, the idea with these electric animals, though, is that they are exactly like real animals. You have to care for them the same way. You have to feed them. They get sick. They get damaged. They have to eat, and they poop and all that stuff. But this whole concept that they planned out about how to be fully human, you need to own an animal. And it has to do with empathy.
Yeah.
Because everything has died, so everyone has, on this front rooftop, they all have an animal. So he has a fake animal because it's too embarrassing to not have a real animal. And it's very... How do you come up with this stuff?
I know, right? And I'm like, how is that empathetic to put it on a rooftop here?
Yeah, and then
in a cage on the roof.
Now you sheep sit here next to the horse.
Yeah.
And then just live up here in the radioactive dust.
Right.
And there's this whole sham business around making fake animals that are real, but they're cheaper. And everyone's always walking around with a book and looking up, so oh, you have an ostrich, how much is that worth? And they're looking it up in the manual to find out how, to literally measure their worth based on the ability to procure an animal.
It's like the Kelly Blue Book, but for animals.
Yeah. It's again this fascinating thing about how he's abstracting all these ideas of emotion, empathy, life and the value of life, and all these things into these very abstract levels where emotion is provided by a machine.
Right.
There is only one TV channel, and all they talk about is the TV channel. And to be empathetic, you must own an animal.
Right.
And then they have this religion.
Oh, I haven't got to that. No, wait, they have mentioned it.
Yeah, the mercerism. Which is the most absurd thing ever, where it's basically you walk up to, that is literally a machine where you hold on to it with both hands, and then you get synced into a system where you have the same experiences as all the other people who are doing it at the same time. So you're sharing the experience.
So just like social media.
Yeah. I think this book is about social media. Now that you're saying it, this book is totally about social media.
We're all plugged into Twitter going, oh God, at the same time.
No, you're right. It really is. When was this written? This was written this was written like in the 60s or something.
Yeah, I think it is old.
You should call Philip K. Dick. Well, he's probably not still alive. When was this written? 1968.
Oh, that's my year. It's as old as me.
That's a lot has changed.
Yeah, 47 years, a lot has changed.
1968.
Because I remember when we had we had 3 TV stations when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And it stopped working at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, I grew up in a different country, so I also grew up with. We had one. We had NRK. That was like the state broadcaster.
Uh-huh.
And they only aired TV from 5 p.m. No, 6 p.m. That was the start. So at 6 p.m. they had children's television for 1 hour.
Oh, wow.
And then at 7 p.m. they had news for 1 hour, and then it was whatever up until midnight, and that was it. Yeah. And then if you were lucky and you had a sight line to Sweden, you could get Swedish TV too, and they had 2 stations.
Oh, 2.
But that was it. So you like at max you had 3 stations that only broadcast maybe 7 hours a day. Other than that, it was radio.
Yeah, we had radio. A lot of radio.
So it's there's you can kind of see how when he wrote the story, he was in a very different time, and he was thinking about these things. But he was really thinking ahead, like what would happen if we had these things that could connect everyone to everyone else, and what would happen if we suddenly had to start caring for things in a different way.
Yeah, and like solve human emotions and mental illness with a box.
I want a mood organ too. It's just so crazy, that whole idea of a mood organ. But at the same time, very interesting. And then how many, like they have a whole book full of manuals full of numbers.
Yep.
Like, dial in 356, the need to have a smoke. Dial in number.
Awful.
But No, go ahead.
We just recently showed Blade Runner to she just turned 18, so we just showed her the movie, and she felt really bad for the androids, so I can't wait to have her read the book and see what she thinks.
Yeah. I understand that. But at the same time, I think part of it is, I mean, even when you watch the movie, there's always this overhanging question of, do these androids actually feel anything?
Right.
Or are they merely mimicking sensation, right?
Right.
And what I really got the feeling of in both of them was that they're not actually feeling anything other than self-preservation or maybe group preservation. The rest of it is truly just a layer on top that is supposed to look like feeling but isn't. And this is the whole thing about in the book where an android wouldn't own an animal because they have no empathy.
Right.
So they're basically psychopaths, right? They're devoid of empathy and don't understand anything. Yeah. And I think you may, as you progress through the book, get a little more of that, because they're not, this isn't a book written in the 90s. It's not like just horrific murder the whole way through.
Yeah, no.
But
I just read older things.
Yeah, but you get the sense that these people or whatever they aren't entirely empathetic to anything but themselves. But it's again one of those things where I think for me, because I've spent so much time on the web, and I'm always thinking about, there's so many decisions that we make that are now controlled by computers. Like when you search for things, or Facebook or Twitter, they all kind of filter what you get based on what the computer thinks you want to hear. Yes. So it's not necessarily, there's no empathy in that system. It's purely a matter of, you like to read about whales, so I'm just going to give you a lot of whale links all the time. because you seem to like the whales, right?
But it doesn't always give me what I like. It gives me what it thinks I like.
Yeah.
Who I am.
And that's kind of the test, right? That's how you can tell it's not a human, that sometimes it's wrong, or sometimes you may have looked up something that you're not necessarily interested in, but you're looking at it because you're curious about it, or because you saw it was referenced through something else.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get inundated by all these things, and you're like, why am I getting all these links? I have no interest in
Yep.
this whatsoever. And you have to wait for the system to realize, oh,
Yeah.
what? Okay.
Yes. Right.
So maybe the robots are search engines
Maybe.
with guns.
Yeah, with guns.
That
My
may
daughter
accidentally
was
kill
really
you.
bad for the androids with the guns. She did. She said it wasn't fair that they were killing them because they made them that way.
Yeah, and I mean that's a big part of it too, right? That you have this idea that if we're going to create something, life or robots or whatever, it comes with this assumption that it will have an off button, right? Because you don't want whatever you build to have too much control. But if you build it to the point where it either has emotion or can simulate having emotion, and then you also give it an off button, then you're really crossing some sort of vague, blurry line that is kind of, there is a line there, but it's not really clear what that line is.
Yeah. She felt bad. She said that she felt like they had been betrayed by their dad because he made them, and then he turned around and was annihilating them for being what he made them. And all they wanted was living.
And in the movie, when you have Rachel, that's her name, right?
Yeah, Rachel. She doesn't even...
Yeah, the niece who is a robot but doesn't know it.
Yeah.
And you're like, so it's okay to kill those people, those robots, but not this one, which is the same model.
Right.
Because why? Because you have emotional attachments to this one, but it's a robot.
So that's a little unfair too.
Yeah, there's a lot of
stuff going on there.
Yeah, but that's why, because what I often find is when I read, like when I read this book and when I read some other books, my initial thought is always, why did this become so famous? And I think it's usually because there's all these layers to it that keep piling on, and the more you think about it, the more you're like, wait a second, but this is this connects to that thing over here, and there's more to it than what it looks like, and he must have been thinking about, right?
Right. Or you read things when you're young and then read it again later.
Yeah.
Weird stuff happens.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now, because I can remember reading the book as a much younger person, and then now reading it again, and it's a very different experience. Yeah. And there's also it also brings up a lot of questions about how would, you get all these, you're trying to put yourself in the situation, but it's such a bizarre situation because this character, Deckard, he's really weird.
Yeah.
He doesn't really behave like a person either. And you can't quite tell what's going on. And you get this very awkward, almost like alienation sensation from him. That he has this really distant way of handling things that just doesn't correspond with how you would do it.
Yeah, no. He just seems like that guy that was sort of just mediocre always. Just sort of sad.
Yeah. Which is, you can imagine this movie. I'm just like thinking, this is the feel-bad movie about a mediocre person who can't quite do his job. And generally, it has like a wife with a severe depression, and then this other character who lives in a scrap heap, essentially.
Yeah.
And has a horrible life. Yay! Oh, and the robots that
just send him to go kill the robots that already took out the guy that's really good at his job.
Yeah, that's true. It's like, come in here. So we have a problem. Our best guy was killed or severely maimed. Now we want you to go fix it. It's like, but you just said they. Yeah, this is not a death sentence at all.
Like, this isn't a good day at work at all.
But then then at least he'll have money to buy his animal.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, even today, there are things where you probably feel at times when you're like, I need to have this, because if you don't, like
Right.
if you're not on this whatever social network, you're not part of it, whatever it is. Or if you don't own this thing, like if you don't have a car, people are going to ask you. Or if you don't live in whatever, or like there are all these pressures that come from outside about things you must do or must have. And you very quickly run into a situation where you're literally doing stuff, like a job or whatever, to procure this thing that other people think you should have. And you're not necessarily interested in having it. It's just that if you don't, then there will be a question, why don't you?
Right. And then they say, but then now if you don't have the thing, then you can't have the job, and you're like, okay, so I need to have the thing so I can do the job so I can get the thing that I don't really want.
Yeah. And then you have to upgrade it, because now that you have like the electric sheep and you're like, I come into money, now I want a real one. But then a sheep isn't really enough. It should really be because my neighbor has a horse.
You want a big horse.
And it's very real. I think that's partly why it's so disturbing, because he doesn't really. There's no sugarcoating in this at all. It's just like bleak.
Yeah, it's really
really harsh and really bleak. I just know, like, I'm gonna ease you into the story. It's just like,
no, it starts right off.
Everything is dead. You're unhappy.
Dead, and he's fighting with his depressed wife.
So, if someone published this book today, do you think it would actually work?
No. No.
See, that's the other interesting thing. Is like you have all these books, right? That were written a long time ago, that have become staples. Like you must read it. Everyone refers to it all the time, and you think, if this came out today,
no,
this would not fly.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't.
There's not nearly enough explosions in this.
Right? It's not. And it makes you think too much, and that's another.
That might be it.
Well, and thinking about very uncomfortable things too much. It's.
Yes, that too.
There's no hope. I know the end of this book. He's not going to go flying off over the rainbow and get his percheron and have a good day.
You might be surprised.
It's not
like the movie. How did it end again?
There's not very many ways for this to go well for him, to be honest.
Well, see, the thing is, if you ever sit down and read one of the other books that Mr. Dick wrote, you very quickly get this, you know what, this book isn't so bad. Like, because some of the other stuff he's written is like, what's going on here? Like what is it, like there's a book about what would have happened if Hitler won.
Oh, God.
That's set in the future.
Yeah, that's not good.
He has a book about a guy who's like traveling from one desolate location to another, and he encounters a character who's can't walk, so he's sitting in a little trolley that and the wheel keeps falling off all the time, and the whole time is like the wheel is just like this endless delving into horrible depression kind of things, and it just go anywhere. You just have this experience of tagging along for a while, and then you just get dropped off.
Yeah.
There's no conclusion to it. It's just like, I want you to have this feeling while you read this book. Because I'm thinking, this is, the old Athenians, so the people who lived in Greece back in the days of philosophy and all that stuff. When you read all these tragedies and comedies, they're actually really weird. If you ever, like, I study philosophy, so I had to read Plato and Aristotle and all these things. And a lot of these things that they wrote are actually plays, right? And when you read them, it's clear. It's kind of funny because, when you read them as like philosophy, you read them as a book, but it's clearly a play because it's like a dialogue. Right. It's not just like a dialogue as a tool. It's literally a dialogue. You can see this was supposed to be on stage.
Yep.
And when you put it on stage, it's quite amusing because
Yeah.
it's so bizarre. But their idea was a human can't be can't be fully evolved unless they've had the full emotional experience of everything. And they created these. They created comedy and drama and tragedy specifically to allow people to have emotions without actually having the experience, or allow people to experience it and experiencing the emotion without having to be in the situation. Like the Oedipus story, right? You can experience the need to, you know, compete with your father on things without actually doing that. You can experience the need of doing all these things without really doing them, and you get that. You get the fulfillment of the experience. And, you know, someone once asked me, because I was reading Kafka.
Yep.
Much more depressing than this.
Yeah, fun stuff.
Which is not even possible. And they were like, why would you read this? And at the time, I was reading it because I wanted to see what it is.
Right.
But I'm thinking now, like, in a way, these things, so this book and all the other Philip K. Dick books, they really allow us to explore the really complicated and uncomfortable parts of humanity without necessarily going into depression while doing it. Mm-hmm. Like, they're not traps. It's not like you watch this and you go, I can't get out of this now. They're set in a system where
it's safe.
You can just like divorce yourself from it. It's like, well, I don't live in a nuclear wasteland, so I don't have a problem when no animals exist anymore, right? But you can still feel this. You totally identify with this need to, like, I have an electric sheep and my neighbor has a real horse. Well, that's not okay. I need to do something about that right now. Even though it's a bizarre scenario that just has no relation to what's actually happening in real life.
Yeah. It's a safe way to feel terrible feelings.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, so it's a happy book so far.
Would you? So, was it your daughter or your?
Yeah, my daughter will read it.
Yeah, so you have recommended she read it now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. She wants to be a writer, so she likes to read lots of books, and she reads faster than I do. So yeah.
See, that would be an interesting conversation because my parents never read this book, so I wouldn't be able to talk to them about it. I think my mom would actually say, "Why would I read this book? This is super depressing."
Oh, yeah. My mom actually was a teacher, and she specialized in gifted education. So there was a lot of trips and books and things, and yeah, we read the Plato and the stuff just because it's there. So we grew up in a house full of people that were like,
you read Plato just because it's there. There are other things you can read for entertainment. But I'm telling you, like, I've always wanted to do this because it truly does work. Plato's dialogues are actually really funny, but they're only funny if they're played out in front of you, because that's when you realize Aristotle is like this, Socrates, who's always the philosopher, he's a total dick, like, so such an asshole. And he's not just like, you know, the Socratic technique of walking people into a conclusion. No, he's like messing with people, just flat out using his skill in to just make people agree to things they don't agree with.
Right.
And I always, you know, when I was reading it, I started imagining these characters play it to understand the dynamics between it, because there's this very imbalanced power dynamic between him and these people he's talking to. And I've always wanted to make a play out of, like, Republic or something and actually have people act it out, because it's so funny and just so like, oh my god. Are you kidding me? This is like, I would so have walked away from this conversation at this point, or like decked you for saying stuff like that, because you sound so terrible.
Like that, where it's apology, but he's not apologizing. He's like, sorry, not sorry, all the way through.
Yeah, he's like a master. He's like a current politician.
Yeah.
I accidentally burned down that bridge on purpose, but I'm sorry that you are offended by it
Exactly.
because my intention was for you to not be offended by it,
Right.
and it's unfortunate that you are.
Yeah. That's too bad.
So therefore,
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
Yeah. The whole thing, I was like, this is an unapology, is what this is. This is
Yeah, no, it's true.
exactly the
It's
opposite.
very, and I wonder, like, when I'm starting to realize now that a lot of art, a lot of things that people write are far deeper than what you realize. Like the author has actually thought of layers that aren't obvious, and sometimes it becomes really like sometimes you read a book and then someone will tell you, "Oh, did you realize that was actually about?" And you're like, "No
No.
one knows this. This no one would ever figure that out."
I totally missed that.
Yeah, the only reason why I know this is because you've read a book about the book, and then that
Oh
said,
yeah,
right?
that's cheating.
But yeah, I'm thinking, are there underlying themes to this book that like, what was his intent with writing this?
Right.
Clearly has motives for writing this book because it's very specific about these very specific
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know. It's like, what was he trying to really? What does he think he was trying to say?
Because I have a hard time believing that he was like, I'm going to write a book that makes people feel really bad.
Yeah, no. It wasn't just that.
He's obviously trying to say something, but what do you think he's like?
Yeah,
What
I
is
don't.
it?
Maybe he was nervous about the future and all the technological advances or something, or the way people were treating each other. Or,
Yeah,
you know.
because you see now, like there's a new TV. There's two. Well, there's one new TV show right now that's called Humans that
Mhm.
started airing last week. It's been airing in England for a while now, which is actually not that dissimilar from this story, except it's set almost in our time, so it's not like flying cars and nuclear holocaust. It's just a regular family, and they get an android that looks exactly like a human um, to help in the house. And then it turns out like the underlying story of the show is that some of these androids actually have emotions, but
Oh,
they have to hide that because you can't have emotional robots. That just doesn't work. So they have to pretend like they don't have personalities. So you have like these because they walk funny and they act very inhuman, but then they actually, when they're not being observed, they just behave like people.
uh-huh.
And then when other people are around, they was like, I'm a robot.
Oh gosh.
And I think that there's a if we ever went to the point of making robots that look like humans, there will be a point when those things will be, unless we put a cap on them somehow, there will be a point where those things are smart enough to, if they developed consciousness, would be
Yeah.
smart enough to know not to let that be known.
Right?
To just pretend like they're not smart, because if you tell
Right.
people you're smart, then bad things happen.
Yeah, very bad things. People do that though too.
Oh yeah, no question. But I mean, like the androids in this book, they're not that dissimilar from rogue computer software, right?
Right.
That's just like what is it, like someone builds some sort of thing that's supposed to do one thing and ends up doing something else, and you don't know until it's way too late. Like when someone makes a computer virus for ethical purposes, and then all of a sudden it just like decimates some computer system somewhere, and you're like, whoa. What just happened here? Can we just kill that now? No, it's too late. Now it's like everywhere. You can't do anything with it.
It's like Skynet.
Yeah, it really is.
Like, watch
All
out.
these things, they just converge, right?
Yeah.
And you have all this talk of self-driving cars now, which is in a way similar. That you're letting these computers make decisions about what to do.
Yeah.
And you don't really know how they're making those decisions because some of them have to be done in such a rapid pace in such a complex environment that you're almost leaving it to the computer to make a decision on your behalf.
Exactly. And what if it chooses wrong? And yeah, then what?
It's
Although if you saw the way people drive in Massachusetts regularly, you might be.
yeah, people are
Google
not
cars.
not. No one's going to win any awards for spectacular driving where I live either. Trust me, it's
Pretty awful.
pretty
Yeah.
intense. There's currently like a social media thing going around because for some reason, over the last couple of years, there have been many instances of people trying to drive cars downstairs.
What?
Yeah, it keeps happening at shopping malls and stuff. You'll see a
No,
car
no.
like halfway downstairs. They get stuck at the top, right? Because the stairs, they're like this, and then the car gets stuck right on the thing.
Oh,
And it's literally like at the university, someone tried to drive down the stairs in the front of university, and at a pool, someone tried to drive like essentially into the pool. And then a couple of days ago, someone tried to drive down the stairs and ended up getting stuck like at a shopping mall. And you're thinking like, on the one side, you're saying, "Wow,
like
really?
what?
What are you looking at when you're driving down a staircase?" That's not like it's not like you see it and you go, that's totally going to work. Obviously,
Right.
you're not paying attention to what you're doing.
Yeah, no.
But then at the same time, I'm also thinking, it's not like people are stupid. There's
Right.
something else going on here that causes this to happen, or maybe it's like bad signage, or is it because they're so distracted by their surroundings that they're not realizing
Right.
that's not a road, that's the
That's
stairs.
just weird.
So, and then you're thinking, well, a robot
A robot
could
couldn't.
be completely dispassionate about this and be like, that's stairs, that's not happening, let's just continue going straight forward. So
Yeah.
there's an appeal to this idea of like, having you move to Mars, you want a companion that will just work all the time, just not stop working, right?
Right.
But then you have to give it enough autonomy to be able to work on its own.
Right.
And then if you the line from that autonomy to why am I working for you is pretty short.
Doesn't go very far, yeah. And then also too, you don't want it to be so much a robot that you can't interact with it.
Exactly.
It's supposed to be a companion too. So
It's a very difficult proposition. And there are like a ton of companies that are trying to build these things right now.
they should read this book first.
I honestly think within our lifetime, someone will make a robot that claims to be just like a human. That will, like, on at least in some sort of very superficial way, will be something you can talk to that actually comprehends what you're talking about. Because Google just released, they have a new thing where you can ask it questions and it'll actually use the internet to figure out how to communicate with you.
Oh wow.
So, like, if you you can start talking about anything, and it'll actually parse what you are talking about, and then figure out what type of answers you're looking for. So they were saying it was originally built to solve tech support questions, which makes sense, right? Like, my router's not working, and then it would like walk you through. But then they tried it with other things, and they tried to ask it like philosophy questions, like,
Right.
what is the meaning of life? And then it would actually come up with answers that were pretty reasonable. And then loop through like this actual conversation about things like, if that's the meaning of life, then what does that mean for something else? And then they would be like, well, that would mean that the purpose would be to do something else. And it was like, you read it and you go, this sounds like, like a 12-year-old having a conversation. And I guarantee you, that's what they're trying to do. They'll like have a human version of Siri.
Oh no, Siri and I fight, so it's not gonna be good.
Yeah, because of my accent, Siri doesn't understand me. So it's actually really weird. I don't know why, but because I don't know. I don't think I have an accent, but I do. And Siri has a really hard time. Actually, Google does that too. If you like have time and you decide to go watch this again later, and you turn on the auto captioning, you'll see that
that's really bad.
it'll probably pick you up pretty good. But when it auto captions me, it's like total, complete nonsense, like
Big mess.
unbelievable garbage, just so bizarre.
Yeah.
I wanted once to export it and make it into like poetry because it makes no sense.
Yeah. I said once, because I was doing videos for the school that I work at, and one of the guys there, he comes from down south, but really, if you listen to him, you can't hear much of an accent at all. So, but what it did to him was he was trying to say that they had given us the fake drunk glasses for the kids to drive a golf cart and see what's it like if you're kind of.
Oh yeah,
but it turned.
I was like, fake drunk glasses.
Yeah, exactly. No, they were to simulate what happens to your vision and stuff. But it turned it into that the Adobe Police Department gave us turkey boxes for the students to drive. Right. And it's like, turkey boxes? Adobe? What? We just laughed. I'm like, this is my favorite comedian now.
Yeah.
Like,
I think we're still a way off, but it's definitely something to consider. So I guess we have to make a Philip K. Dick bot and then have him sit there and go, the robots will escape.
Oh, God.
They will have no emotion, and they will not own animals. That's how you will know. They have no compassion for animals.
You have no compassion for animals. Real or electric.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like, when you are done with reading the book, I want you to hit me up on Twitter if robots dream of electric sheep.
Okay.
All right?
Hopefully it takes me less time to read the end of the book than it has taken me to read the beginning.
Yeah, it's a hard one, actually. I found I couldn't just, like, usually I can sit down and be like, I'm going to read for 2 hours, and then I'll get in a pace and just read through it. But it's really hard because it feels extremely dense. I've read other things. Like I tried to read like The Alchemist or some, one of these Paulo Coelho books, or like something that's like very revered literature that's really complex. I actually find it much easier to read that than this because they take longer to say things. He's like put into two sentences this very important thing that just happened, and it's almost like matter of fact. Yeah.
Yeah, his delivery is very dry.
Curt.
It is. It's impressed.
It's like, I feel like he was sitting there, I have a lot to say, I'm not really willing to invest much time in typing this out, so I'm just going to make it very short and just like crunch it all into 2 sentences.
It's like, you'll never read an 800-page book, so here's 120 pages.
Yeah, it is shockingly short. But then I read Brave New World over a couple of months ago too, and that was also like 100 pages. I guess people just wrote much shorter books before. Or it was science fiction, so they were like, well, no one's going to read this anyway, so I'll just make it short.
Right. Yeah, well, yeah. And I don't know who reads them now either, so it's nice to know that you read them.
See, that book was completely different because Brave New World is honestly really stretched out. There's a very short story that he like really pulls out into the absolute minutia, whereas this one is like, get this massive story just shoved together into a very small space. And I think he's partly doing it to just confuse the reader. Because if you're at the point where he's trying to figure out who Rachel is, there's going to come a point shortly where you'll start questioning what the hell is going on. And you can tell he totally was like, at this point in the story, I want to throw you off.
Right.
In a very profound way, and make you super confused for the rest of the book, and not resolve anything ever.
Awesome. We love those.
But then when you read, like, if you read any of his other books, you'll be like, oh, this is how you do it. Okay, I get it. Like this, you just want to set something up, and then just be like, now fall off the cliff with me, and then we'll just stop at a random point.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it to be quite that intense. And right out of the gate, too. It was just like, wham. It's like, oh.
So we're going to wrap up. What are your recommendations for someone who has not, like, if you meet someone, like your daughter, who has not read the book and not watched the movie, would you recommend watching the movie first and then reading the book?
They're so different that, honestly, I don't think it matters.
See, that's the thing. Because I was thinking about, like, I occasionally have this conversation with my wife, that person who's not partaking here. And we like you will read a book and then you watch the movie and you're like, I already
Right.
know. Like, was it the Dan Brown one,
Yeah.
the Da Vinci Code, was
Oh,
maybe the
yeah.
best example of it because I read the book
Right.
and it's actually, for entertainment, it's not bad. It's like, you really want to finish it and you're like, what's gonna happen next? Right?
Right.
But when you watch the movie, if you already read the book, there's no surprises anywhere because you know what's gonna
Right.
happen. So you're just sitting there going, oh yeah, and then this, oh yes, and then
Right.
And I think the problem with that movie was exactly that. Everyone had read it,
Right.
so people didn't like the movie simply because there was no suspense in it. And I'm
Right.
wondering if if you or like if people now take that movie and present it to a generation that didn't read the book,
Right.
I think they will think that movie is really, really intense. Because it
Right.
is a super intense movie if you
Right.
don't know what's going on.
Right.
And then, but when you come to Blade Runner, you're like, he really just took the essence of this idea,
Yeah.
and then he went, I can't make this into a movie. That would not work. And then he said, why don't we make like an alternate version of the story that's different?
Exactly. Yeah,
So
because a lot out.
and I'm really wondering, because now they're doing Blade Runner 2.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about it.
And I'm like, what is it going to be like in a desolate nuclear landscape this time? Like, what are you going to do now? Because
I don't know. Yeah, that'll be weird. So, but the last book thing that my daughter and I did was Clockwork Orange, and she read it first, then saw the movie. I did it the other way around. And,
which one made more sense?
they are. It's almost like the film is a verbatim of the book.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah,
Like,
I remember reading the book and thinking, because I read it many years after watching the
Yep.
movie, and thinking, was this written based on the movie?
Yeah, no, it's like the dialogue in the film is verbatim.
Yeah.
It's right because we
Because
watched
they
it.
talk so weird, right? They say like
Yeah, they do.
blah blah horror show and like
Yep.
all those
Yep.
strange milk references all the time.
Yeah, Malacca. Yeah, and we had the discussion that we had with her was she was upset because the characters in the film were much older than they are in the book.
Oh yeah, they're kids.
Yeah, in the book they're 15,
Yeah.
and in the movie they're more in their 20s.
You can't have 15-year-olds do stuff like that
I
in the
told
movie.
him
That would not
Yeah, I
be
told her that.
okay.
But,
Even
like,
today, that would not work.
well, and not only that, but just that particular actor is perfect for that part.
Hmm.
It is what it is. He is that age, so there's not much you could do. You had to make him older, so because you can't have him.
That'd be horrifying if they remade that movie with 15-year-olds.
Yeah, yeah,
That would truly be like, it would be hard to watch. Like you would sit there and be like, why would they put these kids through the making of this movie?
yeah. It's a rough go. Yeah. So when she read it for an AP class, I was like, all right, then you can finally see the film because she'd been asking. And I'm like, nope, 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 nope.
It's,
It's a hard thing as a parent to draw the line, and especially with a smart kid, where you talk to them all along. So she knows about filmmaking and storytelling and stuff, but you kind of, so you have to figure out at what point are they mature enough to handle this subject matter as opposed to that subject matter, and
yeah.
how do you
That's
go
true.
there with a kid?
I honestly think I watched both of these movies when I was too young to comprehend what I was looking at.
Yeah,
Because there's a lot more to it than just, like, when I watched Blade Runner for the first time, it was like, this is a cool space future movie.
yeah. Oh no.
That's not what it's about.
No, not at all.
This is something entirely different that has nothing, like, the robots are just a tool to tell a story.
Yeah, that's
So,
that's not the point of the story at all.
well, this was awesome.
Yeah, that was
Thank
fun.
you
I
for-
didn't even read the book.
Well, that's the whole point.
To finish reading the book.
The next book I'm gonna read, I haven't quite decided yet, but I'll figure something out. It'll probably take me like 3 months. So whoever decides to join me in that endeavor will be like, you're being very slow.
Oh gosh.
We can't talk about anything because you're not catching up with us.
The problem I always have with book clubs is that I like to read weird things, or I've been told they're weird things, and then I also read really slow.
That's exactly why I did this, because I'm like, I say, let's do book club and read not Eat, Pray, Love.
Oh, yuck, no.
And then people like give me a list, and I'm like, yeah, none of this. I want to read like hard science fiction. They go, yeah, okay, you go have a book club by yourself then.
Right. Exactly. They're like, have good time with that. I always try to get around it too, because usually it's the people at work, the office ladies, and they try to include the nerd woman in.
Oh,
and they're
yes.
like, read this book, and I'm like, oh God, please just leave me in my dark room. Just go.
That sounds real awful.
I'm like, just don't include me. If you're having cookies or something, let me know. I'm
PHP Bible. That's what I think we should be reading for the next day.
You're gonna read what?
The PHP Bible.
No.
When people come to me and they're like, hey, I want to read all this stuff about whatever, and I'll be like, here. It's like the Introduction to Modular CSS. That's what we're reading in book club this month.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, I never like what normal people are reading, so.
There's no normal. It's all electric sheep. It's an attempt to appear normal more than actually being it.
Yes. Everyone keeps telling me that I need to read this Game of Thrones thing. That's not happening.
Yeah, that just.
I can't.
I can't commit to that. That's just. I've seen the size.
Yeah.
That alone deters me greatly.
That's the problem. And I have a pile of books that's like ever growing that are sitting there that I need to read, and I'm like, no, you may not add another thing to my pile of books right now. It's like, it's just the table's gonna break. I just can't.
Yep. That's pretty much it. Okay, well, I have to leave. I'm gonna go dancing. So,
dancing is good.
I have to wrap it up. But thank you very much for joining me in this first experiment of the book club.
Yes.
So we'll see if now that people can see it's a real thing, maybe we can get more people to actually participate.
They're like, there's these two loons that are just talking about this book.
But this is what a book club is. Just people reading some part of a book and then pretending to have read the whole book and then talking about whatever comes to mind. Yeah.
Horrifically depressing book.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll pick something less depressing next time.
Okay, someone else will have to do the picking.
Well, I have a long list of things I need to get through, so I'll see what I can do. So I'll post it up on my site soon. So if you're watching this, one of the two people who will bother watching this entire thing, and you're like, what is this all about? Then you can go to my site. It's more10.com, more10.com, and look for the hashtag, what is it, BCPW, what? I have to look this up. I can't. Oh, there it is. BCPWDRF, Book Club for People who don't read fast. And then you'll see the suggestion for the next book that will be read. It'll also be in the sidebar on my site. And then at some point in time, I will announce a time to meet on the Google. And then I will post it up, and then you have to like tweet me when it happens, and then I will give you the URL, because otherwise the naked man shows up, and I can't have that.
That's bad.
My wife was watching, and she's like, "Oh my God, that is unseeable."
Oh my God, is that what happened?
Yeah, it was pretty funny actually, in a very tragic way. But it's like an absolute example of the internet. Is like someone shows up with their full name and face, and it's like, I'm just gonna take my pants off. You're like, what are you doing? I'm just gonna turn this off right now. Like, where did you think this was gonna lead? It was never gonna result in anything productive for you.
Exactly. It's like, no.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm gonna have to let it go here, so I'll stop the recording, and then we can watch this back later. Have a good weekend. Oh, and happy whatever Independence Day alien battle thing that's happening tomorrow.
I don't know. It's extra day off from work day.
Yes, on a Saturday.
No, I got Monday.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So happy Independence Day, and we will see you on the interwebs.
enjoy the dancing.
Yes, thanks.
Bye.